Hi everyone, my name is Ronald Denisio and I'm the Virtual Content Specialist for 7th grade Social Studies. I wanted to take the time to talk about strategies for teaching Unit 5, Day 13, the Underground Railroad in New York. The original lesson can be found in the Unit 5 Day-by-Day Planner, which can be found on page 135 of the original Passport to Social Studies unit plan. In this teacher-facing video, I will walk you through the learning activities and important considerations for teaching this lesson remotely, as well as in person. Again, we will focus on Unit 5, Day 13, the Underground Railroad in New York, but the strategies discussed can be used for lots of different lessons in our curriculum. Our lesson objective asks students to examine local sites connected to abolition and the Underground Railroad in order to understand New York's contribution to the movement to end slavery. Our first slide is our teacher-facing slide that we will delete before posting for student use. That has the title of our lesson, The Underground Railroad in New York. Our focus question: how did the efforts of individuals and groups influence the causes and effects of the Civil War? Our next generation learning standards, where the learning activities in this lesson will target, including determining the central ideas or information of a primary or secondary source, provide an accurate, objective summary of the source distinct from prior knowledge or opinions, as well as integrate visual information from charts, graphs, photographs, videos, or maps with other information in print and digital text. Finally, on the bottom here, we have the materials and resources, including 2 maps, the New York State Network to Freedom map, as well as an Underground Railroad map, a Weekend Explorer video, the Underground Railroad in New York City article, the I Love New York and Underground Railroad website, additional resources, including Parks, Recreation, and Historical Preservation Underground Railroad, and the New York State Underground Railroad sites graphic organizer that students will use in Day 2 of this lesson on Student Workbook page 233. Here's our second teacher-facing slide that we will delete before posting for student use, but it is a really important slide to read before you talk about the Underground Railroad in New York. I want to highlight the bottom of this slide here, that when teaching this content, the New York City Department of Education follows the guidance of writing about slavery, teaching about slavery. And this pertains to this lesson, the Underground Railroad in New York, because when we are writing or teaching about enslaved persons, we want to avoid using runaway slave, and some alternatives that we can use are fugitives from slavery or self-liberated or self-emancipated individuals. For our introduction to model slides, we will take some time to build the necessary background that will help students to engage with the sources in this lesson. First, you'll display the 2 Underground Railroad maps. Ask students to describe what they notice about the routes of the Underground Railroad. Students will make observations and then infer why enslaved people would be moving in the directions portrayed in the map. You might want to ask students, what does the direction of the routes tell us? Next, we'll provide some background information for our students. We'll let them know that the Underground Railroad was not an actual railroad, but a network of secret routes used by enslaved people to escape to free states or Canada. It was made up of people, free blacks and whites, who worked locally to assist people escaping slavery by providing places to hide or transportation. Churches, specifically the Quakers and branches of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, often played a role in assisting the escaping people. And some formerly enslaved people returned to the South to assist other enslaved people in escaping. The main learning activity allows students to choose from 2 options to learn about the Underground Railroad in New York. Students can either watch the Weekend Explorer video or read the Underground Railroad in New York City article. Students will be asked to listen or read for ways that New York City played a role in abolitionism and the Underground Railroad. We'll ask students to think about how New York City's role in the Underground Railroad could be commemorated or honored, and they'll be asked to write their ideas in the blue space on their right. If you're back in the classroom, you can also encourage students to use a note-taking strategy in their social studies notebook to make their thinking visible about ways that New York City played a role in abolitionism and the Underground Railroad. Day 2 of this lesson asks students to use the I Love New York website to learn more about sites in New York that were important to the Underground Railroad. Students will read about the various sites and complete the organizer on the next slide with the location of the site, names of important people associated with the site, and how and why it is commemorated today. You can model for students how to go to the website and read or read a portion of the article, and then also show students how to click each of the links to learn more about the specific sites and how to complete the graphic organizer on the next slide. Finally, Students will respond and discuss the following question: which site do you feel best commemorates the role of New York in the Underground Railroad and why? Some strategies that could work for the Underground Railroad in New York lesson is first a jigsaw strategy where students can read different and research different Underground Railroad sites in New York, especially on the second day of the lesson. They can do this in breakout rooms or in student groups when you're back in person. And then students can present their findings to their classmate using the guiding questions that we went over on the graphic organizer. While students are researching sites for the Underground Railroad in New York, they can also do this with a partner or a triad or a small group. Additionally, the wrap-up question provides space for students to have a small group discussion, as well as a whole class discussion to wrap up the lesson. So just a reminder that the teaching strategies for in-person and remote learning work for lots of different lessons in the Passport to Social Studies curriculum. Feel free to give these strategies a try.